Pause 1 second. No, that was a really good take. They're just opening the... Moving is a bit distracting.
Hi, I'm Vasco.
And I'm Henrik.
We just launched MCP, meaning that OpenNeon can now act as an MCP server. You're probably familiar with the struggle of switching back and forth between your AI tool and where you work, your browser. And whether that's screenshots, copy pasting, you're constantly picking up things from your browser to feed context into your AI because AI can't really see what's going on in your browser. Well, now that changes because with MCP, essentially your AI tool can see everything that's happening in your browser.
So we need to talk about what MCP is. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's essentially a language for AI systems to talk to each other. There's a server component and there's a client component. And the client will essentially call on the server. Neon in this concept, this ecosystem, will act as a server. And other AI systems, let's say Claude Code or prototyping tools or whatever it is, will then act as a client and call on Neon as the server. And then we need to double tap a little bit on how MCP actually technically works. So when I say talk between services, this is more or less what's going on. Once authenticated, because there's an authentication process, especially for Neon, because we need to make sure that there's like no data leakage and whatnot. So once authenticated, the client, the AI system that wants to utilize Neon, will essentially call for a list of what tools are available. And after that, it's essentially just natural language, more or less.
So in other words, MCP ends up being this language that your AI tool and your browser share, and you essentially get them to talk to each other without you being the middleman in between and having to have that burden on you, right? So what that means also is that you save a lot of time in this context switching, which you can focus on other things you're doing in your workflows while your AI tool is handling that task that you already have it going.
Yeah, exactly. And then not just for omitting like copy pasting and whatnot, which is a very important use case, but it's also like Neon is the browser you use, that I use at least, and then because it's the browser I use, I'm logged in. So let's just bring up a couple of terms here. Headless browsing is when programmer, for instance, or a quality assurance person would like to test a web page, and they can essentially bring up a browser fresh from kind of a new install every time. It has no context, no session history. It doesn't remember where you were logged in and so on. While a headful browser is when, like Neon, you are logged in. This is the browser you use. So therefore, it can use all that good context, right? The logged in pages you are into, you can open and go in and lurk around in there. And that makes it just so much more useful.
So headless browsing essentially means you opening up a fresh browser every time you want to jump back into your workflow. So everything you did yesterday, even though it's connected to the same task, will not be remembered. And that's the difference here between that and headed browser, that because you're logged into all the tools you already work with anyway, it's going to remember all of that, which is super important, so you also don't lose time, just keep feeding it and providing context over and over. So what can you actually do with this? So we talked about the context on the page, right? Essentially your AI being able to read what you're doing. It can also list the tabs you have open. So whenever you want to do a specific action in a tab, it's useful for the AI to have the full list of them so it knows which ones to go for. It also can take screenshots, and only if you allow it can also access your browser history, which is by default disabled.
Exactly. And in addition, the Neon MCP connector can do a lot more also, but these features are turned off by default. But it can open a URL, it can switch tabs, it can close tabs, so that's the sort of the navigational part. Mm-hmm. It can do clicks, so mouse clicks and keyboard clicks. It can also search, use the Google search even. And of course the star of the show is to fill in forms. That's what I talked about when I started doing stuff myself, filling in things.
Yeah, I mean it's just a very easy to understand because it's also one of the most, I guess, bureaucratic parts of navigating online, and no one really likes to fill in forms. So naturally, this was one of the quickest examples we gave, even internally when we were launching the feature, that it can become very useful to just outsource certain things that you don't really have the time to just go through them yourself.
But if we then, like the last list I mentioned, they are opt-in, so you need to go and activate them. That's like per design, because obviously it's AI, and if you give your AI system too much power, you need to be able to say control. So we have a lot of sort of built-in features, and usability wise we are taking care of the user here also. So it's not like you're not giving your life away to your AI system and Neon. So that's why it's a little bit pessimistic, so to speak. It's opt-in for those sort of right type of tools. There's also like a prominent sort of toggle to shut down AI connections in the dialogue. And there's like a status indicator, this little color indicator that will change color when the AI is active. Like if an AI system is actively using Neon through MCP right now, the color will change. If an AI system is using Neon, the active tab will always be lifted to the front, so that there's like an indication to the end user that something is going on here. And of course, at the very end, we give the user the ability to inspect what has happened. So there's an activity log. I did this morning. I had to look at this activity log and analyze it a little bit. So of course I dumped it, brought it to an AI, and I brought out the histogram of this. And I saw that, for instance, yesterday I used the Neon MCP connector 326 times. So I'm just like, it's a really, really useful tool. These are not all just test cases, I can promise you. I use it.
More than just bringing you more access and more ways to discover AI and how powerful it is, we feel the need to also provide you with ways to not feel like it's taking over everything you're doing. That's why majority of these are opt-in, because we want you to stay in control of how you use it. And maybe some of you are not entirely sure on how to use it, and we urge you to just get knowledgeable about it and try it gradually. And we hope that these security measures we put in place can help you just never lose control of what you're doing. For a more in-depth look into how MCP works, we're going to be leaving some more in-depth materials in the description. Feel free to go through those and figure that out for yourself. So if you're using Opera Neon, you can head up to your extension bar on the top right corner of your browser, and you'll have default instructions for Claude Code, N8N, and Lovable. However, you can also connect any AI tool that has MCP client to it, and we urge you to, because we want you to explore as many as we can. So if you have questions, you can leave them in the comments, you can head up to our community, and we'll always be able to answer you and help you figure out how to navigate this.